in a way, if you're experiencing lots of dysregulation or your child is having a hard time managing their big feelings, that's actually a really healthy thing.
They have the tiniest bodies, but the biggest emotions. If it's not quite so infuriating sometimes, most of the times, it would actually be cute. But when they're having their emotional outbursts and temper tantrums, I don't know about you, but I often end up with some very big feelings of my own, which is why I'm really interested to hear what today's guest has to say. Gen Muir is a parent educator and mom of four who's just released her book, Little People, Big Feelings. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you for having me.
So, big feelings, we have many names for them: meltdowns, tantrums, tricky behavior. It can feel a bit overwhelming sometimes. Why can't they just be reasonable? Jen, when incidents like this happen, what you seem to be saying in your book is that it has less to do with behavior and more to do with how kids feel. You call this emotional dysregulation. Can you please run me through it?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we know is that dysregulation builds in the body, and for little kids particularly, their frontal lobe, or the part of the brain that helps them be reasonable and rational and handle things the way we sort of hope that they will, is not fully formed until they're 25 to 27 years old. So it's a really long it's a really long way off. And so when we have a 2-year-old that's struggling to share, it can feel like maybe we're getting it wrong, or they're not a very nice, they're not a good sharer. But actually the way that they learn to share, or the way that our child learns to be regulated in the face of disappointment or frustration, is through experiencing that emotion. So in a way, if you're experiencing lots of dysregulation or your child is having a hard time managing their big feelings, that's actually a really healthy thing, because every time our child gets that opportunity to kind of flare up into that kind of big emotion range, and when some of the time we're able to be with them in those moments doing the process, which is co-regulation with them, we're helping them to build essentially a new synapse in the brain that builds towards that regulation. Every time they get a chance to practice that, they are building those skills that they can self-regulate, that they can be resilient, that they can navigate those things on their own. But we're also doing something so much more powerful in those moments. We're letting our child know that they can come to us when they're happy and when they're being reasonable, as well as when they're sad and when they're being unreasonable. And that's a really important message around love and around relationships that we really want to bed down, particularly in the first, 10 years of life.
So, emotional dysregulation is about having these big feelings. And the thing is, when they have these big feelings, I feel like when my son has these big feelings, I feel like strangling him too. Like I get big feelings too. How do I not get big feelings?
So first of all, so important to know you are not alone. So we all feel like this. There's no parent on earth, when their child is really struggling emotionally or having a meltdown, there's no parent that's sitting there thinking, oh, I love this moment of parenting, right? We all hate it. We'd rather have our fingernails pulled than sit there with a child that's really, really upset. So it's so important to know we all struggle. And it's also important to know why we struggle. So I think having a sense that the reality is the way that we're parenting, our wish or want or knowledge around sitting with our child in some of these emotions, not sending them away, not smacking them, not saying go to your room and come back when you're calm, which is the way most of us were parented. Our parents didn't have access to the knowledge that we have access to now, and so things were different. And for most of us, we were taught in the first 5 years of life that showing feelings that big was not something that was very welcomed within our family of origin. That's not something our parents liked. So as a result, in the first 5 years, we learned that it's not really safe to show that. It's not a good thing for our relationships to show that. So while we can know at a cognitive level, I want my child to be free to express themselves and I want to support them in their big feelings, at a kind of physical level and at the sense of who we were as a child, everything is flaring up saying this isn't safe. We need to stop it. We need to solve it. We need to fix it. We need to shut it down. And so that's what will flare that anger. And that anger is actually serving a protective mechanism for you. So the reason that we might want to punch a wall or strangle our child or, you know, picture throwing them out the back door and locking it is because that anger is stepping in, because we are going into fight or flight. And the anger steps in to protect us from something that's much more threatening, which is fear. What if I'm getting this wrong? What if this is an unsafe thing for my child to be expressing? What if there's something very wrong with them or with me? And so the anger steps in to protect us. And it's just a matter. It's not a simple matter, but it's a matter of doing our own work so that we're able to catch that emotion flaring, that anger, that kind of big reaction from us in the moment. And wherever possible, and it's not always possible, we all yell, we all snap, but sometimes learning to catch this and think this is more about me than my child. What does my child need in this moment? And this is the work of parenting, because it remains really hard for all of us.
Is co-regulation simply about, so when the kid has that big moment, you just simply sitting and being calm? What else does it involve?
You want to think of it more as lending your nervous system to your child. So if our child is 10 out of 10, like imagine, you know, the smoke coming out of their ears, they can no longer hear us, they're no longer making good choices. So depending on what's happening, we are responding by lending our child our nervous system. So sometimes what we're lending them is our calm. Sometimes our child is just crying and they're thrashing, and we will open our palms, soften our face. I like to sit on the floor wherever possible, because when we sit on the floor, it actually calms our nervous system. I struggle to calm my nervous system under pressure. And so I sit on the floor and I actively focus on not joining my child in the meltdown. That's my goal. You know, I'm going to not have a meltdown myself. So I'm just like, I might say to myself, this is normal, this is healthy, or there's nothing wrong with my child, or this is a good kid having a hard time. So I will say that to stop myself going up into fight or flight, but also what I'm doing by not freaking out, by not trying to fix it or solve it, I'm actually lending my child my calm. And what's happening is my child borrows my regulation, and that teaches them regulation. But the reason we're sort of saying it's not so much about always being calm is because sometimes if our child is kicking or hitting, we can't sit there and say, oh, you're having a hard time, and let them kick us in the shins. You know, we want to be what they need in that moment. And so that's why we're more being what they need, and we're stepping in to be their frontal lobe or to be that regulation. And that regulation may be, I'm not going to let you hit. And I know you're having a hard time. So I am still empathetic that you are struggling, that you're a good kid, but I am going to help you with that behavior. So sometimes co-regulation will be picking our child up in a public shopping center and getting them to the car where it is safe, where they can express that feeling. So we're essentially not trying to shut down, stop, or punish our child for their emotions, but sometimes we are trying to step in and help them with their behaviors in these moments.
I like what you said as well, like, you know, from the beginning where you're saying that all these things are going to continue to happen because that's just who they are. They haven't developed the ability not to let these things happen. But every episode of it is a practice into getting better, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah. And if we can, I mean, it's sometimes we really want to coach our kids to do things differently. So just say our child gets really worked up over the fact we said no to something, which is really normal. It makes sense to be disappointed. And so we might try to coach them in the moment. You know, you don't have to get so upset. You can ask me nicely. You know, we might want to do that, but they can't hear us until they're regulated. So if we want them to hear us, we need to get their nervous systems or their emotions back to a nice kind of regulated zone. And if we can do that before we try to coach them, they're more likely to be able to hear our words when we do coach them. And we certainly can start to say to, I mean, you said your son's 8, you know, we can say to an 8-year-old, that didn't go so well, did it? Thinking back on what happened yesterday, and this happened, and then you got worked up, and then this happened, and, you know, we're talking through what happened, but then we might say, I wonder what we could do next time you feel so disappointed that I've said no to something. And then we're giving our child a chance, not in the moment, to practice how they might respond in a different way. So that's emotion coaching, really good for kids, particularly from 4 or 5 upwards, really helpful in terms of helping them develop different strategies. But we're never trying to give our child a strategy in the heat of the moment. If you try to tell a child having a meltdown to take a deep breath, things will not go well. And look, how can we argue? If my husband tried to tell me to take a deep breath, I would not be happy.
That is true. I read somewhere before it was mentioning this high emotions and low intelligence.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, totally. So while our child, and look, we're all the same. We're no different. If we are very dysregulated ourselves and we're really kind of panicky about, I don't know, finding the location of a meeting, we're not thinking as clearly, are we? And our kids are no different, except they experience that dysregulated state more often because their brain has to practice that, because they've got all of their emotions sitting there and their amygdala, so the bit that sends them into a heightened state, that's all fully developed, but their frontal lobe, the part that helps them manage that and make smoother decisions and self-calm, that's not fully developed for a long time. So it makes sense that they have lots of episodes of this. And while that's happening, they can't hear our words. And so we really need to respond by just creating calm and safety above all else, getting them back to a regulated state, empathy, and then we can coach.
And what I really like about your tips, right, is that while we think a lot of this applies to 2 or 3-year-olds because, they're the ones who are known for throwing tantrums, it, like you said, it does apply to older kids as well. I tried it with my 8-year-old and it really worked. And I suppose what I'm trying to say is that it's never too late to try emotional regulation. And even as adults, we're helping our kids practice it, but I think we ourselves need to kind of practice it ourselves as well.
Yeah, look, I mean, the great secret of this stuff, it's essentially about a safe relationship and a safe attachment. And the truth is, all of us need to feel loved, to feel seen and heard, and to feel safe. And these are the 3 things our kids need. These are the same things we need from relationships. And so, all of this stuff in my book, I'm using on my 14-year-old. And as my husband will attest, it works on husbands too.
Perfect. So on our website, we've published an extract from Gen Muir's book on what you can do the next time your child has a meltdown. I'll share the link to the article in the description, where you also find information on where you can grab her book and learn all about how to tackle the most challenging moments of raising young kids. Thanks for your insights today, Jen.
Thank you so much for having me.
And before we go, I was just wondering, did you want to share a final thought?
My final thought would have to be go easy on yourself. Of all of the tips that I share in my book, of all of the tips that we've talked about today, it's so important to remember these are not things we're doing 100% of the time or even 50% of the time. If we can shoot to do this with our kids around 30% of the time, that's enough for our children. And this is the best chance of turning out a child with a secure attachment style that has the best chance of reaching their potential. And I think that's really important, because often with parenting advice these days, we take it on and we think that we need to do it perfectly and all the time. And that is not the case. Our kids benefit most from us doing it really 2 feet in authentically some of the time, and some of the time allowing them to experience those struggles without necessarily always intervening in the same way. So there's lots of room for imperfection in what we talk about with today.
Oh, I so love that. I think I'm going to start crying. That is such, yeah, that is quite a profound thought, because you're saying 30%, right? Which means that out of every 10 times, we only need to get it right 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can imagine even a little baby struggling to reach a ball. And imagine if every single time they had a little bit of struggle, we just stepped in and moved that ball to them. We never let them have any struggle. We're stepping in, always helping, always helping. That baby never gets to experience that feeling of struggle, of having that struggle without us intervening. And they never get to experience that achievement of the day that they actually reach it, and they think, I did it, right? So sometimes we're allowing some struggle without doing much. We might just be quietly observing or just saying, yep, we're doing the bare minimum. And other times we recognize my child really needs me. This is really, there's no question here. And we sit on the floor and we're doing it completely, trying to do that co-regulation like we talked about today. But it's so important to know that no one does it perfectly all the time, and 30% is definitely enough.
It's really, really helps with the mom guilt.
Yeah, so important.
So as mentioned, you can find out more about what to do in the face of your child's next emotional outburst, Jen's sides, and how to get her book, Little People, Big Feelings, on our website, momsatthetable.com. You'll find the links in the description too.